Hey everybody, Lawrence here with Dirty Basement Terrain coming at you with another one. Challenge pieces. I think I've talked about them before, but I'm doing it again. I enjoy challenge pieces. Basically, you come across a challenge. It says, "Hey, come up with this general idea," but your mind has to try and come up with something that fits that general idea, and it stretches the imagination. Challenges to me, are fun, not contests, but challenges. It's the challenges are basically more or less to challenge yourselves, not to compete against anyone else who enters. And it's just fun. It might get you to do something that you might not never do or whatnot, or it stretches your imagination and what you'll do. Now, the current challenge that I did was called, I think, Kind of Wet, which I think the basic idea was for water features, but basically I had to have a little bit of wetness to it. But I was thinking, it's like, blood's wet. Okay, yeah, I can do this. But I kind of went twisted. Let me show you. Baby head, blood fountain. But hey. And I also made sure it was miniature friendly. So I can actually put this on the table at some point. But this was just something that I honestly never would have done if it hadn't been for the challenge. So let's check it out. And let's get to it. Show you how I did this.
Best place to start with these Dollar Tree baby dolls. Rip the heads off. Got 5 of them, so I'm decapitating all 5 baby dolls. Okay, here I just want to mark out with a pencil roughly where I eventually want to start hacking these things up. Like I said, I'm just getting an eyeball view of it, and eventually these are the lines I'm going to basically give this baby doll a lobotomy at. Now that I got my lines in, I'm grabbing my Olfa knife and extending the blade and start hacking away at this head. I said the lines I put on were just a guide, really. I don't exactly follow them, but cut off the back of the head, then cut off the bottom back hat part. All I really want right now is the face. So the rest of the head gets cut off and saved for later. And just a little bit of trimming, and that'll be it. Okay, here now we're all the backs of the heads that I had cut off. I'm going to use those for the bowls. So I'm just figuring out where it's going to go. I pencil lined it in. Now I'm using my X-Acto blade to cut out the little indent that I'm going to need for the bowl to go into. Yeah, I might have to do a little trimming here and there, do a test fit. Don't ask me why I flipped it like that, but it does require a little bit of trimming, but not that big of a deal. Small amount of trim here and there. And now I'm getting my super glue. I think I'm using Zap-A-Gap brand. Not that that matters, but... And glue the 2 pieces together. And I have my bowl for the face. Okay, for these, the mouths need to be open, so I'm cutting along the guidelines that I drew with the pencil, cut along the sides, then in between the lips, so I can actually have an open mouth. It's a pretty simple process. Now, some of these baby heads had teeth showing, and if that, for the mouth part, I would just cut in between the lips with the teeth showing. I would just cut along the upper lip and the teeth. It worked out. Now that I've got this cut, I just want to glue this bottom chin and bottom lip part so that the mouth actually is open. This got to be a little bit pain in the ass because it wasn't sticking properly. I mean, this is that weird baby doll head vinyl, whatever you want to call it, but eventually it worked. And I wound up with an open mouth. Don't worry about any gaps. I will be taking care of that in a later step. Of course, here I'm adding some tentacle tongues. These are tentacles from Final Faction Tentacle Pack that I had chopped up. And it's just a matter of adjusting and getting it to the right angle, and then putting in some super glue and then gluing it in place. Holding it for a moment or two, and then I'm good. Did this 5 times. And I'm also using some baking soda to accelerate the drying process, which helps. And here I'm just grabbing out some milliput, equal parts of both colors, and then I'm going to mix them together. It's a pretty simple process. If you ever use green stuff, then you can use standard milliput. It's the exact same process. The only real difference is with milliput, you have a lot longer work time, and it's softer and slightly stickier than the green stuff. At least I have noticed. But it dries hard and can be sanded and all that happy stuff afterwards. Here I'm just rolling out like a long pencil thin like area, and then I'm going to cut a piece off and then roll that even smoother. I'm going to be using this to fill in the little gaps around the chin area where when I cut the mouth open, there's a big gaping hole, and I want to fill that in. And I'm just going to smooth it out and sculpt it and make it look more natural, I guess. I don't know. I'm just filling up the holes. And here I'm taking some more of that milliput, and I just want to fill where the mouth is open, that the tentacle is coming out. That leaves a lot of empty space that is visible unless I'm going to fill it up, which is exactly what I'm doing here. And I'm going to sculpt a few little lines in the open mouth part just for aesthetics, but I don't want it like to be open all the way into the back of the head, because that's just something I'm going to have to worry about if I don't take care of this now. So it's just a matter of filling up the mouth and pushing it back a little bit to make it look, well, pretty. Now here, I'm taking a piece of 1-inch thick foam and just carving out a rough shape of where the baby heads are actually going to rest eventually. I'm not really going with any specific shape at the moment. I'm just kind of like, honestly, at this point in time, I'm just cutting a shape, honestly, that I think looks good. I had no real plan when I was cutting this part. I was just like, yeah, I'll do this. Yeah, I'll do that. Whatever shape will work for you, and I'll be able to carve around for the baby heads. Now here, I'm carving out the bottom part of the fountain thing, whatever I'm going to call it. But I'm just trying to shave off so, it's not like a straight up area. I just want like a slope to it so it blends into the tabletop a little better. For right now, I'm just doing some rough cuts. That's all I'm really doing. This is the bottom of the piece. Here I'm taking a piece of 3-inch foam, and I'm just carving it to roughly roughly match the top section. This piece here is actually going to go between the top section and the bottom section, which were both 1 inch thick pieces. So overall, I'm looking at a height of 5 inches. But I said I just wanted to give this some height. So I went with this 3 inch thick foam. You can use multiple layers of thinner foam if you want, if that's what you have access to, or however you want to do it. But again, I have this 3 inch foam, so I'm just roughly carving it to match the top section. Or kind of close. And here I'm just taking away the sharp edges and rounding them off a little bit. Honestly, I don't know why I did this. I could have just left it a little harsher, but I'm also trying to get a rough idea of where the baby heads will eventually go. I know there's another inch section that's going to go on top of this, but the baby heads are more than an inch thick. Or, yeah, tall. So I have to get an idea of where everything's going to place. And just keeping them at hand is a big help. Again, just roughly, not even really like, oh, this has to be done this way. And also, I have to plan on, get a rough idea on how miniatures are going to get up there. So this is roughly where I'm thinking the staircase will go. So I just wanted to make sure that was there. Oh, yes, that's right. I actually skipped the whole that first 1 inch section and decided to go with this route. As you can see, the 3 inch section, I basically roughly traced the pattern out and then just started cutting another section just so it looks better. It matches up better. The 1 inch section will match up better with the 3 inch section. So this is going to be the actual top. You know what? We do this, and that's the thing. When you're making a craft, you can change midway. And I honestly completely forgot I did this up until I'm doing the voiceover right now. Go figure. So I get a rough shape. And it's like, yeah, it's getting there. So we'll have to see. And it's just a matter of like just trying to get stuff to match up. Baby head test. Yeah, it's working. So right now just got to basically trim out the areas where the baby heads themselves are going to go. And I'm going to have to cut sections out for the heads to actually sit in. Okay, now I've got this section roughly carved out where the bowls of these baby heads will sit. I'm just kind of rounding off some edges that I don't like. And now it's time to basically try and figure everything out before I want to actually go ahead and start attaching these permanently. But now it's basically grab this and put a big old wad of hot glue in there on low temp so it doesn't melt the foam. Insert the baby head. Sorry, I forgot to keep this in camera. But it's a pretty simple process. Hot glue, put the baby head in, and move on to the next one till I get all 5. Now here I've got all 5 done, and I'm roughly, now I need to carve out more of a section of the middle part here because the baby heads just don't fit as is. So I marked out where they all kind of sit, and I'm just carving out chunks. So the chin, the bottom part of the face, and the chin will actually sit in the rock itself, or dirt. But the middle section. Okay, now that I've got it all carved out, do a test fit. Well, actually, it kind of works. But still need to trim a little out. I said test fit, test fit, test fit. That way you won't be kicking yourself for trying to glue it down when it doesn't quite fit. Then you're going to have massive gaps that I'm going to already have enough gaps to fill up. I don't need any more. So it's just a matter of doing some more trimming. Test fit, trim, test fit, trim. Take small amounts away because once it's off, it's a bigger pain. And another test fit. And a little more trimming. Like I said, test fit, trim, test fit, trim. And now it fits. Okay. And this part is simple. I'm just mixing up a batch of sculpting mold, and I'm going to start filling in bigger gaps, like where the baby heads are against the foam. You can see that massive gap in between the top layer and the second layer. This is just to basically get everything to blend in and look like it's all one piece and not like it's a couple different layers. Sculpting mold's pretty good at this. Now I got to figure out where to put these stairs. I'm using an offcut piece of the 3-inch foam that I had. And I'm just kind of roughly sketching out on the side here how I want to cut it for the stairs. And as you can see, that's what I got. Of course, let's bring out the Proxon. I just want to basically cut it out, test fit it, get an idea of what I want. I said, I do. Sometimes I do constant test fitting. Can it be a pain? Yeah, absolutely. Does it save me a lot of trouble later on? Oh yeah. So I'm just trimming, fitting, trimming, fitting, trimming, fitting. I said a lot of times I do not plan out my builds. It's a lot of test fit and trim, test fit and trim. Okay, here I'm actually cutting a piece that I'm going to use for the first section of stairs, or the piece of stairs that actually butts up against the blood altar itself. Now, actually, if you'll notice on the right there, cut up piece, that was my first attempt, and I just screwed it up so bad, I was like, no, not using it. So it's off to the side, and I'm starting over again. Hey, that's part of my technique. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. A piece will eventually be turned into bricks. But again, here I'm just, instead of taking massive cuts, I just kind of shave down because it's just how I do this. I don't really plan that far ahead, and I'm not one to measure things out to the very smallest micro millimeter or whatever, but I would rather just experiment and try and see how it looks. Usually it works out pretty good, but sometimes, like you can see on that chunk there, sometimes it don't work. So here I am just cutting away. And if you notice here, the steps are already cut out. I honestly just, once again, I forgot to record something. But the steps are pretty simple. You know. Hey, cut out steps. Not hard. I did that with my Proxon. And here, I'm just gluing the two sections of stairs together. And the reason I went with the like curved part angle there is because I didn't want the bottom profile of the piece to be too big. And if I curved it like that, visually it looks cooler and it kind of shrinks the overall size down. Now, to get the stairs actually to fit, I'm gonna chip away here and try and get it to the point where it actually kind of like slot in. And here I'm actually marking the bottom piece so I can actually cut it out, and then the bottom section of the steps will lay flat on the table. Pretty simple. It's just a matter of using a Sharpie, drawing around it, and then cutting out a section. You may have to actually do a little bit of trimming or shaving or whatnot after you cut the initial section out, but that's fine. This is, like I said, just to get the steps on, so they actually sit flat on the table and butt up against the upper part of the build. Like I said, just doing a little test fit. And not quite. Need to cut a little bits out here and there. Again, it's better to take small amounts out and have to take small pieces out more than once than taking large chunks out and then realizing you took too much. Easy. Maybe a little bit time consuming, but it does work. And here, now that I got everything all cut out, it's just a matter of splotching down some hot glue in various spots and then attaching the stairs. And now I have stairways to the top of the piece. And these are actually miniature friendly, that's why I made them so wide. I didn't say player miniature friendly, I just said miniature friendly. Now I want to add a piece here to make the top middle a little bit higher than the bowls themselves. And I'm just going to use an offcut from a previous project. I think this is roughly 1/4 of an inch thick. I don't want it raised too much, just so it's above the baby heads. And here I'm cutting a piece that'll kind of cover the area I want. And here, as you can see, I'm pressing down, so it actually will get an impression of where all the bowls are. So I know exactly where to cut. And as you can see, I'm already cutting around the circles. It's hard to see on camera, but it did leave impression lines around where all the baby head bowls are. And baby head bowls. But it's going to fit, and it's going to work out. Just, at least in my mind at the time, I thought, this is going to work out. This is going to work out. And actually, eventually, it does work out. A lot of trimming and whatnot, but it does work. And as you can see, pressing it down like that worked perfectly. Now I have a piece that pretty well much matches where it's supposed to go. And here I'm just cutting out a piece for where the stairs run up. And right now, it's a matter of trimming different pieces that are just a little bit too long for my taste, and also shaving off the sharp edges for a more flush pattern, gradual fit to the piece below it. Like I said, this part is just a lot of trimming until I get to the point where I'm happy with it. And now I'm at the part where I'm going to glue it down. Now, as you can see, I'm making several marks from that piece down to the baby heads and different areas. Since this is such a custom fit piece, I want to be able to make sure when I put it down on the hot glue, it's in the exact right spot. Because there's not a whole lot of forgiveness with hot glue. You have a few seconds to adjust, but I want to be able to get it just right. Now here I could have used several different ways of texturing the sides of the stairs, but I decided I like the way individual bricks look, so that's what I'm going with. Plus, I have a massive supply of individual bricks because I turn all my offcuts and scraps into bricks, or a good chunk of them anyway. But here I'm using hot glue to attach the bricks. Now, it's a good idea for the first row of bricks to be always, like the first row or two, you should use hot glue. It's just a good idea, especially if you're building a house. After that, you can switch over to like a PVA so you can get a bigger area done at one shot. But me personally, I have a really giant supply of hot glue sticks, so I'm going to use hot glue. Again, this can be tedious. In all honesty, it can be very tedious, but I prefer the way individual bricks look. And I have a bunch of them, so this is what I'm going to do, at least for this project. These steps are going to be stone, so I'm going to texture them with the foil ball just to give them that classic foil ball texture pattern. Honestly, I should have done this before I did all the bricks. It would have been a lot easier, but hindsight is 20/20, so I can still get it done even after the bricks. But again, if you're going to do something similar to this, do it before you add the bricks. It's easier. Had I done this before the bricks, I would have had to taken care to avoid the bricks. But, oh well, again, like I said, hindsight. Here I've mixed up another batch of milliput, and I'm going to be using this to fill in some cracks and gaps and seams, just to make it smooth and whatnot. In all honesty, I probably should have done this with sculptal mold, but I'm new to using milliput, so I'm like a kid with a new toy, so I'm just still trying to get used to using it on a regular basis, because I'm really after the worm monsters I built, I really like this stuff, and I think the more I use it, the more I'll get better at using it. So like I said, I'm just sculptal mold would have been a better choice. honestly, but I just wanted to use it, the milliput. Now here I'm using the foil ball to basically texture all the foam. Any exposed foam that doesn't have milliput or Sculptamold on it, this is just basically to press down any like some sharp edges that are real blatant. You can kind of see them in the camera, but I just want to, even the areas that are going to be dirt, that are bare foam, I'm going to texture it just to help out a little bit. Now I'm actually using Shifting Land Shape Cutter. I'm using the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 side, the 6-sided, the Pentagon? No, that's 5. The hexagon side, yeah. And I just want to cut out I'm cutting it as small as I can get because it's going to be a small altar. Cut it as small as I can get, like I said. And these shape cutters are relatively simple to use if you have access to it. Okay, now I know this is too big, and I want to shave. I want to make it smaller, but again, I don't want to make it too big or shave too big of chunks and wind up being too small. Yep, still a little too big. Like I said, I want to shave small pieces off overall. Now, you notice I actually cut a slice off there. That'll make sense in a little while. But now I'm going to shave this down a little bit more and shave another slice off. Again, this will make sense in a little bit. Now let's make this, the hexagon, even smaller. Test the size out. And needs a little more. It's always best to shave small parts off than take big chunks. Yep, that fits. Now let's get it for height. Honestly, I don't remember how. I think maybe an inch tall. And those two pieces I shaved off are the base of the altar. See? Makes sense now. No, it's just a matter of gluing the pieces together. And you notice those holes? Those were the nail holes from the nails in the shape cutter that holds it still and in place. But it's still usable because those holes are going to get covered up. I think I'm using wood glue here or Aleene's tacky glue. Either one will work. But again, there you go. Glue together, ready to go. I do, and now I'm using a foil ball because I want it to be a stone altar, so it's just a matter of rubbing in some stone with the foil stone texture. And when I was texturing earlier, I forgot to texture the top, so here, that's all I'm really doing because I want the top to be stone. So, texture, texture, texture. Make it look pretty. Now, I want channels from underneath the altar to into the running into the baby head bowls. So just draw a line out with a Sharpie and then deepen and widen it with a pencil. See? Pretty simple. And I'm also using this spike tool. I don't know what to call it. Just to like punch holes into the altar itself. So it looks like the blood from any sacrifice is running through those holes and then into the channels to the bowls. At least that's what the concept was in my head. And now I'm just gluing the altar down. Pretty simple. And I decided, I didn't want to I wanted to make a little like puddle down here, so I just used fire to melt the foam a little bit. Now here I'm using some green stuff because I want to make some worms with the green stuff roll maker. So as I green stuff simple, cut out an even part, mix them up. Yeah, I'm trying to decide which one I want to use here. Do I want to use this? I don't know. I'm going to try to experiment with a couple different patterns, see how they look, till I get one that I'm satisfied with, which I'll eventually use. I have some successes, I have some failures, and that's green stuff can be forgiving at this point because it hasn't set up yet. So let's try this one. No. Let's try again. Okay, let me try. Yep, that works. And as you can see, I'm going to bend it, the worms or whatever, in a weird shape. As you can see. Now, I need some skulls, and I have these skeletons that I got from Dollar General this past Halloween. They're about the size of like what an ogre skeleton would be, but I just need the skulls and the torso and arm of one of them. So I'm just cutting the skulls off and then trimming all the mold lines because they're Dollar General skeletons. They're cheaply made. They're mold lines from all heck. So I'm just going to do this till I get the amount that I want and then move on to the next step. Okay, here I'm using an airbrush to apply a black primer to the piece. Typically, on a foam piece like this, you would use a black Mod Podge to give it some extra strength. Well, unfortunately, and I could do that on the foam parts, but I would still have to get the airbrush out. Or you can Mod Podge all the foam parts and then use a rattle can. Because these baby doll heads are not going to be Mod Podge friendly. It won't stick properly, so I'm just using this spray primer. Like I said, if you want to use a rattle can, you can, but be careful because the rattle can may melt the foam somewhat. And now it's time to primer up all the skulls and the worms. I'm just going with a light gray primer through my airbrush. Again, you can use a rattle can for this. I just don't feel like going outside to spray everything. And I have it stuck down with some tape. And like I said, this is a really light gray primer. Doesn't have to be perfect. I just need to get the top majority of the tops done. Because I'm either going to be just washing these or hitting them with some contrast paint. Okay. Now I'm going to be zenithal highlighting the entire piece. Just basically spray from above at an angle. For this, you could definitely go with rattle can if you want to. Either a really light gray or a white. Okay, now I put down a fresh piece of tape and I'm putting all the skulls and the partial skeleton down. And I'm just hitting them up with Agrax Earthshade from Citadel. One coat and done. And I said, I'm not going for display quality stuff here. I just want tabletop and I want some skulls for the piece. Again, Agrax Earthshade is a quick, easy wash for doing bones. If I was going to go for display quality, I would then highlight them with a bone color paint, but nah, I want a dirty look, so this will do just perfect for what I want. Now here I'm just using Citadel Colors Contrast Nasdreg Yellow. Forgive me if I butchered the name, but it's become my go-to for painting like maggots and worms and stuff like that. So I like the way it looks. So that's what I'm going to use. And like I said, I'm only going for tabletop quality on this. So They don't have to be perfect, just pretty. Okay, and now, basically anything that's stone, I'm going to hit up with a little bit of watered down Apple Barrel's dark blue gray. It's my go-to for base color, dark gray base color for stonework. Like I said, I'm just hitting anything that is going to be stone with this. Now, I'm going to be hitting the bricks and doing with some random colors. Well, not so random, usually my go-tos. But this first one I'm doing is Rookwood Red from Deco Art Americana line. This is not a necessary step, but I like doing this because it gives it some visual interest to the piece, and it's like not all... because it's fantasy. It was built when they supposed to be like built when they used whatever they could get, and not all the bricks they may have gotten were gray. So this is really just for a visual interest. Again, you do not have to do this, but to me it makes the piece pop a little more, if that makes any sense. Now I use multiple colors, not just this one, but this is the only one I showed. Now, we all have those stupid sponge brushes that we got in the multi-brush packs. Well, I found a use for them. I just ripped off the ends in like a jagged pieces and use it to do some sponge stippling to get the other colors throughout the piece, which I wanted to do. Normally, I used to just paint like streaks, but the sponge technique is actually better, in my opinion. So, and now I have a use for this massive bag of sponge brushes that I could never figure out really what to do with. As I said, just rip off the ends and tatter it, make it kind of tattered, and sponge it up and chuck it after I'm done. And I did this with all the different colors that I used. Now here I'm just going with a mid-tone gray. I'm using Apple Barrel's Pure Gray, which is my go-to mid-tone, and going for like a 75 to 80% coverage. Now all those different colors will show through will really show through at this point, but don't worry. I'm just putting on a mid-tone color and leaving the deepest recesses alone. And here I'm just using Apple Barrel's Granite Gray, which is a light gray, to dry brush on a quick light highlight to all the stone areas. It's a simple process. I'm using an old makeup brush from the Dollar Tree. And we all know how to dry brush, and this is a really light dry brush highlight on all the stone areas, including the baby faces. During this painting process, though, I am taking care to avoid the tongues or the tentacles coming out of their mouths, because that's going to be something different. Now, it's time to start painting the dirt. For the base color, or the darkest brown I'm using Apple Barrel's Burnt Umber. Basically, I'm going for 100% coverage on anywhere that's going to be dirt. Or at least I plan on being dirt. Pretty simple concept. I'm just using straight up paint, no water down, no nothing. Just get it on, get it covered. And here I'm using a mid-tone brown, Apple Barrel's Nutmeg Brown. It's my go-to. I have a lot of go-to colors. You get to a comfort level with certain colors, you just use them because you know they work. I'm going for, again, the same as with the stone, 75-80% coverage here and all the areas that I'd already previously painted with the burnt umber. And now I'm going to do a dry brush highlight with a Dollar Tree makeup brush using some Territorial Beige from Apple Barrel. So this is just to highlight the ridges and whatnot on all the dirt areas. Now I switched to a smaller brush to get into the tighter areas because I didn't want to accidentally brush over onto the stonework. Pretty simple. And here I'm using a homemade black wash. I'm just basically going over the entire thing, with the exception of the tentacle tongues. Everything's getting a black wash, just to darken it down. Of course, I'm going to highlight it again afterwards, but this is just to make the shadows pop a little bit more, I guess. I don't know. It looks cool, so I'm going to do it. We want to make it look pretty. But again, I'm just giving everything a coating in the wash. And now that now that the wash is dry, it's time to bring up some of the highlights again. And I'm going to use the granite gray for the stonework, the same as I did the first time when I was doing the dry brush highlight. Pretty simple, not a hard thing to do. I mainly want to get the most raised edges and just bring up the edges. And like on the brickwork, I'm going from top down, trying to make it look like the sun's hitting it. Now I'll pay a little extra attention to the baby faces just to make them pop because they are the focus of this piece. So, and with the dirt, I'm using the Terry Joy beige again to give it the dry brush highlight after the wash. Same as the stone. Now, for the tentacle tongues, I'm using contrast Blood Angels Red for all the tentacle tongues. I like using contrast paints because, well, it's because of what I got on hand, honestly. And I'm not a miniature painter by far. So, this definitely helps out. I just wanted to look kind of blood look to them, so yeah, Blood Angels Red works. Now here I'm using Green Stuff World's coagulated blood effect. It basically looks like semi-dry blood. I like using it for like little splatters and stuff, but on this I definitely went a little overboard, especially on spots that it did not need it because I was going to be covering up later, but I didn't think of that at the time, so lots of blood. I wanted blood on this because this is a challenge piece. It's like wet effects, so lots of blood, lots and lots of blood. And this is a baby head blood fountain. Okay, now here I'm using some watered down PVA 50/50 mix between water and PVA, and spreading it on the flatter sections of the dirt areas because this is where I'm going to have like grass and whatnot. You don't want to do the whole thing all at one shot because that just gets to be a pain in the butt. But I'm using some mixed herbs or Italian seasoning here in the U.S. and then some dried up tea leaves that I got us tea bags. I'm also using from Woodland Scenics green grass, earth, and yellow grass. Put down the earth first, then the green grass, and I'm using the yellow for highlight areas. I'm just sprinkling it on. I'm not dumping it because that's just what I like. Of course, now one of my favorite parts, adding moss paste. You can use moss paste to hide any screw-ups, honestly. But you also want to just put them in places that it looks like moss would grow, in corners and cracks. There were a few spots that I noticed. Oh man, that was a mistake. I got to cover that up. Well, moss paste is a great way to cover up mistakes. Now I'm just using some Aliens tacky glue and some grass tuss from various manufacturers and colors, and sticking them wherever I think it would look good. And honestly, you want to use more than one color because it'll, again, it's more of an aesthetics, visual look. It'll make it pop a little more. A single color will they'll just kind of all blend in together. Well, if you use multiple colors, it'll pop a little bit better. But again, this is just stick them where you think they look good and keep going until you think, yeah, that's enough. And that's pretty much what I did here. I had multiple colors, multiple manufacturers, and just kept going until I was like, yeah, that's enough. Don't ask me what that is. I got it from the jewelry section at Michael's. And it's basically a single little bar with a little loop that I can bend open and put some of this chain through. I think it's army painter. I'm not sure. But I said you can use jewelry chain for this if you want. And I'm going to stick one end through it. And man, that's being a pain in the butt to get on. Because I want like a chain to hang around the edge or the side of the altar or the sacrificial altar for this piece. And I just cut the bar off a little bit, dip it in the glue, and then jam it on into the side of the altar. It's foam, it goes right in, and that little dot of glue will help hold it. And I'm going to do that 6 times, and then I'm going to feed the chain through each little loop. Now, I want it to be at least one part broken and hanging on the ground. So, before I went back to the 6th one, I just that's a perfect spot. And besides, honestly, I was actually going to try and get it the whole way through, but then it just became a pain in the butt. In my frustration, I decided to make it a broken chain that's laying on the ground and just said, screw it, you're on the ground. I'll be honest, this part did get a little bit frustrating trying to feed that chain through all those little loops, but I got it. Okay, now let's do the fun part, the blood. I'm using Liquitex inks. I'm using... what colors am I using here? Oh, yeah. I am using Pyro Red and some Burnt Umber. I'm using like an equal amounts of IPA to the 5-minute epoxy I got from the Dollar Tree. And I'm trying to experiment and sprinkle in some tea and some mixed herbs or Italian seasoning just to see what it winds up being. Mix it up for a little bit and then just pour it on in. Now, the reason I added the alcohol was to give me a little bit of extra working time because this 5-minute epoxy stuff does cure fast. So it actually makes it more fluid and gives you extra working time. Now, I got to do the baby heads because this is a baby head blood fountain. Not just a blood fountain, not just a baby head sacrificial place, but a baby head blood fountain. Pour some in, sprinkle a little of the herbs and the tea on, and put in one of those like maggot worm things. And then if you notice, I took some of the blood and then ran it up that little channel that runs up underneath the altar. So those channels had a reason, had a purpose, and that's why I did them. Again, this is a pretty simple process. Once you get one, you just repeat the same process until all the different bowls are filled up. Easy. Of course, here I'm using a homemade pigment powder, which is basically just soft pastel chalk scraped into a powder. And I'm applying it in corners and crevices to give it a shadow dirt look. It works. And this is a makeup brush because essentially this powder is almost exactly like makeup. So like I said, just want to get a few of the deeper recesses and areas, and including the dirt areas up the side, just to give it some extra shadows. Which, once I was done, I thought, yeah, this actually looks good. This is an optional step, but I think if you do this, it just gives it that little extra something at the very end. And here I'm just spraying down the areas that I added the pigment powder with some IPA, isopropyl alcohol, just to set it so it doesn't rub off. Which, if you don't do this, it will. Does this cut down on the dusty look to it? Yes. But again, it'll keep it from rubbing off. And here's a couple of glamour shots. Don't they look pretty? Yeah, I hope you enjoyed my twisted creation. I know I had fun making it.
Hey everybody, if you made it this far, it means you watched to the end, and as always, I do appreciate that. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. If you want to see more, click subscribe, because more videos are coming. If you want to leave a comment down below. If you want to get a hold of me directly, come to the Discord page. There is a link to it in the About tab on the Dirty Basement Terrain homepage. I now have a Patreon. If you'd like to become a Patreon member, right now there's a few perks that are like Patreon only tabs on the Discord page where you can vote on what the next video is going to be. So if you can, great. If not, subscribe. I mean, I can only ask that. But again, guys, I hope you enjoyed what you saw. And always remember, the only person you got to worry about when making terrain is you, because it's your terrain.